I'd like to welcome you all to come out tonight and listen to our program about the history of the Altamont Fair. My name is Doug Cornwell, born and brought up out in Schoharie County on a small farm, and ended up in Rotterdam in a condo, and have volunteered at the Altamont Fair for the last several years. I'm on a committee there. It's called the Historical Preservation Committee. It was formed back in 2018, and that was to celebrate the 125th anniversary of the Altamont Fair. Several of our members are here tonight. I'd like to ask them to stand as I point them out, please. Marilyn Miles, Homer Warner, Ann, please. Beverly Filkins. Beverly is our moderator, our leader. She's volunteered for, I better be careful what I say, I'll move over here, 35 years at the Altamont Fair. That's a long time to volunteer, but it's admirable. She does a wonderful job. Our committee would be in havoc if it wasn't for her being there every Monday when we meet. She holds us together, and she keeps it interesting, and we look forward to coming to the meetings. So myself, after being born and brought up on the farm out there near West Bern, I was educated at the Schoharie School, SUNY Albany, SUNY Cobleskill first, and then SUNY Albany. For most of my life, I bought and sold antiques, appraised antiques. Went all over the area, worked for many law firms, banks, doing appraisals of house contents for estate purposes, divorces, family splitting up estates and so on, to put a value on antiques and household goods. So I enjoyed doing that for a long time. And I got into my mid-40s, and I said to myself, need some health insurance and a pension plan. So I applied for a job at SUNY Albany and facilities department there, and was hired. And the last 20 years that I worked there in the facilities department, and I really enjoyed working there, having gone there to school and coming back as an employee. But it was a great place to work, wonderful people to work with, and just a great atmosphere. So I'm glad I went there, and learned a lot about working with people there. And that's enough about me. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I was in Vietnam in 1969. Received a Bronze Star, was a sergeant in the Army. And discharged in 1970 and came back to Bern. So the fair history. We're going back to, let's go back before the Altamont Fair just very briefly. We have found evidence that there were fairs in Albany County prior to the Altamont Fair, which was formed in 1892. We have found evidence that as early as 1819, in Menands, New York, outside of Albany, there was a fair there in 1819, and it was just a small, you got to think of it in its context. It was a small agricultural affair or gathering. There were no Ferris wheels, and no tilt-a-whirl, and nothing like that. So there were some, through the early 1800s, after 1819, there were a few other fairs held in Menands, and I have also found evidence where there were a couple fairs that were held on the grounds of the state capitol in downtown Albany, and also a couple of fairs that were held in Washington Park in Albany. So these all predate the Altamont Fair. In 1892, 4 businessmen, prominent citizens in the village of Altamont, came together, and they said, let's form a fair. And these are the same forefathers in the village of Altamont that had formed a fire department, a hose company in Altamont. These are the same 4 men that laid the groundwork and got it rolling to put a public water system in the village of Altamont. And this is all prior to their meeting and getting together in 1892 to form the Altamont Fair. So the four guys got together in 1892, and they said, we want to have a fair here in Altamont. And they bought 24 acres of land in the village there. And the first thing they did was build a fence around the whole area, wooden fence. And they erected a grandstand. I think we have a picture of it, maybe. Not this one. Anyway, they built a grandstand. They built a half-mile dirt track because they wanted to have horse races. Horse races was a big country kind of sport at the time. So they did that in 1892. They started work in the fall, and they said, we're going to continue work into the year 1893. And they promised each other that by September in 1893, they would have the first fair in the village of Altamont. It was 4 days long. Obviously, there was no night fair. There was no electricity. So it was just 4 days. Okay, visualize the date, 1893. Nobody had a car yet. How do you think people got to the fair?
Horses.
Horse and buggy? Any other way? Walk. How about if you lived in South Schenectady, Voorheesville, or South Bethlehem? Train. Sir, I like your answer. I'm going to give you a free ticket to the fair. You'll be my guest at this year's fair.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for your answer. So they came by train. And I have ran across in my search through stuff the rates for the West Shore Railroad in 1896. And I need to get my glasses to read this. So a round-trip ticket from South Bethlehem to Altamont was 65 cents. A round-trip ticket from Voorheesville was free, and a round-trip ticket from New Scotland was 35 cents, and the train came all the way in from Amsterdam, and that was a $1.10 ticket. It cost 25 cents to get in the fair. That was the admission charge in 1896. Well, 93 too, but if you came on the train. So a lot of people did come on the train. There was a train station right in Altamont. You could get off the train there. They had a horse and wagon there that would shuttle you into the fairgrounds. And it worked pretty good. So let's go. What you got here, Mike? I'm sorry. I didn't introduce. Without Mike Decker, I could not do this presentation. He is on our committee, not too long out of college, and I said when he came to one of our meetings, what's this young guy doing here with us old-timers? He don't fit in. And I looked out the window, and he came to the meeting in a Model T pickup truck. And I said, my God, he must love history. We've all got new cars. He's got a 1925 Model T pickup, and he's driving in. I said, he belongs here. But Mike, thanks for helping me tonight. Yeah, I know nothing about computers or any of this stuff, and I don't want to learn at my age, so Mike is my crutch. But Mike contributes so much to the committee, so we appreciate it. I'm sorry I skipped over you. You should have been in, well, you couldn't have been in the chair and up here both. So we talked about the train. I want to move on. The next year after that first fair, they decided that some of the horses that were coming for the races, we have this half-mile track now, we needed a barn to put them in. So after the grandstand that was built in 1893, we built our first horse barn, 1894. That barn still stands and is used every year at the fair to house horses. This picture is our floral building and fine arts building. It is modeled exactly after a similar building which was at the Cobleskill Fair in Cobleskill. It was built before ours, and ours was patterned after that building. This building still stands. It looks exactly like that today, and it was built in 1896. So we've taken good care of it. We've kept it painted, and the foundation and the windows and everything in good order. So that is a historical building. So Mike, what do you got next? Okay, this is just kind of a general picture of the fairgrounds. This is going up Altamont Hill, the hill behind the fairgrounds. Tents were then and still a part of the outdoor exhibits at the fair. The Midway really wasn't very much at that time. It was more agricultural exhibits and showing cattle and sheep and goats and horses and that kind of thing. So this is, somebody said earlier about the horse and wagons, and we'll come into some pictures a little bit later. This was built in 1901. These two buildings still stand, and this grand kind of entrance, this is Grand Street in Altamont coming into the fairgrounds. This for years was the Secretary and Treasurer's office, and it had this beautiful all wooden archway in between, and several years ago, an administration building was needed because we had employees, a manager, and secretaries and stuff working in the fair office year-round. So we needed a building with heat and air conditioning and, you know, modern Wi-Fi and everything. So they built a new administration building on the fairgrounds. And so the Secretary and Treasurer's office, which date to 1901, incidentally, were turned into restrooms, and that's what they are today. So I thought it was a shame, but I wasn't around there at the time, that those two historical buildings weren't preserved as something besides restrooms. But I guess we need restrooms wherever we go, so I don't know. You got to weigh it out. But I wish they'd build a new building. All successful committees and businesses have a mission statement. We have one. It says the Altamont Fair Historical Committee Mission Statement. The objectives of the committee shall be as follows: to gather any materials pertinent to the Altamont Fair, use them for displays to be viewed by the public, and to maintain them for future generations. So that's our mission statement. What have we done? We formed a committee in 2018. We promoted the 125th anniversary of the fair, and of course we're now up to 133 years, but we made this nice pamphlet and gave it to all fairgoers that came that year, the 125th anniversary. And then we wanted to keep the committee intact, thanks to Beverly. And what are we going to do? Are we going to plan for the 150th? No, it's 25 years away. We got lots of time. So we started to investigate what we had in inventory and archives and so on. And it was a crying shame what we found. We have every secretary's minutes back to 1893 for every year, and they weren't stored properly. We have every premium book from every fair, and they were in paper bags just loose, taken care of. So, and we had no inventory. We have 8 museums on the fairgrounds. We had no inventory of the contents of those 8 museums. So we investigated, and we found out that there is a computer program available. It's called Past Perfect. And we investigated. We found out that the Washington County Fair in Greenwich uses the same program for inventory of contents of museums. We found that the Schenectady County Historical Society also uses the same program, Past Perfect. So for $1,080, we bought the program. And then the work began. We visited over a period of months into the second and third year. But anyway, a group of us went out every Monday, and we went into every museum. We picked up every item. We photographed it. We described it. We brought it back to the office, and other people typed all the information and the pictures into that Past Perfect program. We now have a wonderful inventory that you can sit down at the computer and bring up at any time you want. We had 1,500 items, and we cataloged or inventoried anything that we thought was worth more than $10. And it went quite well. And we have that permanent record now, and we add to it as needed. We delete from it if needed. And it's very simple to do now that it's all on that program. So we wanted to do some other things, and we had some money. We put in for some grants from the Altamont Community Traditions Group, and we obtained some $500 grants from them for a few years in a row. And we badgered the fair management for some money out of the treasury, and they knew we were doing some good in the community or in the fair, and they gave us $1,000 a few different years. So we were able to pay for the Past Perfect, and then we took the next step. We bought all kinds. Yeah, this is the Past Perfect. This is just an example to show you every item that we looked at. We gave a number. A cutter. This is a cutter, a horse-drawn cutter that was made in Albany. It was made by an H. McDonald, who had a buggy factory, a wagon factory in downtown Albany at 161 South Pearl Street. It has a tag right on it that tells us that information. And there's a picture of the sleigh. It is in completely original condition. And just a side note, nothing to do with the fair, but these horse-drawn cutters for years were kind of nondescript. They just had straight sides. They weren't fancy at all. And this McDonald and another company in Albany decided that there was a need for a horse-drawn sleigh that had a little more style to it. And so they developed this, what they call a swell body or a butter bowl cutter. So the straight sides, it bows out with the seats, has a leather dashboard, and it has beautiful original stenciling on it. And they dressed it up a lot, and they were very successful. The McDonald, the real estate at 161 South Pearl Street in Albany is now just a vacant lot. So I don't know whatever happened to the building and so on. But anyway, but that's what it looks like. Here's another example. This is the date we cataloged it. And this is a buckboard wagon in original condition. Actually, this wagon is in storage in one of our storage buildings. It's not on display at the fair because I'll show you in a little bit. We have some much nicer wagons and sleighs in what we call the 1890s building. But there's an example of one of the pictures that we took, and So going back to the grants that we received, we got all of the paper products, and Marilyn Miles is here, and she spent hours and hours and hours, hundreds, you can't believe, hundreds, maybe thousands of pictures, and all these beautiful old ribbons from the cattle show in 1919 and stuff. And we got them all out of these paper bags and cardboard boxes, and we've spent nearly $2,000 in the last year to buy archival boxes, and all this stuff is now stored in archival boxes in a safe, dry, secured place. So it'll be there forever. And that's very important. Here's Bev. Is that you, Bev? Oh, yeah. This is just an example of some of our cable boxes, all different sizes, and flat ones for maps. And we've got air photos taken from the air of the fair, and they're so interesting. Unfortunately, with a lot of the pictures, we don't know who they are. Here's a picture of a kid leading a goat, or a family standing around a cow that just won a blue ribbon, but nobody knows who they are. But we've kept the photos, and once in a while we find out who somebody is, but a lot of it we don't. But anyway, everything is marked, well taken care of, and Marilyn, thank you. You spent so much. She's still working on it. So anyway, okay. I don't want to run over time because they locked the library at 9. We can't get out. So I want to tell you an interesting story about, because I love to research things and I love history. So I was sitting in our Fair History Museum at the fair one day, as just, being there to watch our stuff and so on. And a man who I didn't know came in, and he asked me if I had anything to do with the history of the fair. And I said, yeah, I was on the committee. And what was he interested in? And he handed me this post note. I've kept it. This is from 2022. He gave me this. So it's 3 years ago. Anyway, he said, you should contact a man named Wayne Blessing, who's outside of Rotterdam in the town of Princetown. He's an elderly man. He's in his late 80s. But he told me that his father in 1928 entered a raffle here at the Altamont Fair for a brand new Model T Ford, like this one. And he won the raffle.
Oh my God.
I said, my God, this is something. They've never had a raffle before, or never had one since. So I started my research. So I go back to the fair minutes for 1928. I don't see anything about a car. Well, something's wrong here. So I start going back in the minutes, and I still don't find anything about a car. So the next thing, I go to the archives of the Altamont Enterprise newspaper, and I start searching 1928. And there's nothing about a car raffled off at the Altamont Fair, a brand new Model T Ford. So I don't know what to do. So Tom Capuano, who's moved away now, but he was helping me at the time, he said, let's go back. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe Wayne don't remember correctly. And he was not alive yet in the 1920s, so he was going from my memory. So I called him up and I said, Wayne, can I come and visit you? I live 10 minutes away. Yeah, sure. So I went and visited him. And I said, do you remember anything about the car? He said, Doug, he said, it was a few years before I was born, but he said, I do remember the conversation in the house after I was born, obviously, that my mother was madder than heck that Millard Blessing spent money to buy a raffle ticket at the Altamont Fair. We had 5 kids, we had a small farm, we had no money, and he's at the Altamont Fair buying a raffle ticket. But of course then when he won the new car, oh boy, she was happy. So that's about all he could remember. So I don't know what to do. I can't find anything about the car. If this is a one-time thing, why wasn't it in the secretary's minutes? Why wasn't it in the Altamont paper? This is a big thing. So Tom and I started going back, and finally we got back to 1924, and we were able to ascertain that before 1924, Model T cars had wooden spoked wheels like this one. And after that, they continued to make Model T Fords into 1925 and on, the Ford company, but they had iron wheels instead of wooden spoke wheels. So that helped us a little bit. So we're searching. We got back to 1924, and I found in the Altamont paper, this is in the September 19th issue, in 1924 of the Altamont paper, it says Millard Blessing of DeWaynesburg. DeWaynesburg was then spelled with an H on the end. Won the Ford car given away by the Ford dealers of the Capital District as an advertising plan to attract attention to their exhibit. And it was a business getter. That was what was in the Altamont paper. So I said, my God, I'd love to have a picture of that and see what it was like and know more about it. So Tom, in his infinite wisdom, stumbled upon this picture in the Guilderland Historical Society archives. And this is the tent in 1924 that the Ford dealers all went in together and had their cars on display and had this raffle. The fair didn't have the raffle. The Ford dealers had the raffle. That's why I wasn't in the fair minutes. But just to show you, there was 10 Ford dealers there, Helderberg Motor Company in Altamont, New Salem Garage, Myers and Watervliet, Orange Motors, still in business, and they were in 1924 because they were part of this. Webster Motor Sales Schenectady, Wright Motor Sales in Delmar. They were part of it, a Ford dealer. Scotia Motors in Scotia, Schenectady Motor Sales in Schenectady. There was a Ford garage in Voorheesville, Slabon Motors, and there was a Trice Motor Company in Albany. So those dealers. Now, just as a side note, in my research for all this about Model Ts, because I don't know anything about Model Ts, this guy does, but I don't. Apparently, before about 1923, Model Ts were assembled in the Ford plant in Dearborn, Michigan, one at a time. But in 23 and 24, they started to turn out Model T Fords in bulk because they went to the assembly line. And that was probably the reason that this gels into that time frame that we now have a product. And the other thing, they came way down in price. I think I read that up until the mass production started, a new Model T cost near $2,000, and they came down to like 300 and something. So that's what the assembly line did for Model Ts, and I'm sure that's the reason they wanted this advertisement at the fair. So that was my research. So I went back and talked to Wayne Blessing after all this research and pictures, and I took him all the information, and he was so grateful to know, exactly about his father winning the car and the true dates. It wasn't 1928, And but he did win that car, and I was hoping I could find out from Wayne or someplace else. I was just curious what a raffle ticket might have cost back then. If you only paid a quarter to get into the fair, it couldn't have been very much, but I didn't find out. So let's move on, Mike. That's enough about the Model T. So this is a picture inside of our fair museum. We have some interesting stuff in there. This particular counter I'm very proud of. This is from the original Wallace Armor hardware store in Schenectady, which is long gone, but it was on Erie Boulevard. It was there forever. And this cabinet would have been used when they sold nails and fence staples and that type of thing in bulk, by weight. So they would have been in those galvanized lined counter cabinets. So there can't be many of them around, but we have that in our museum. Several years ago, I don't know just how many now, maybe 5 years ago, I don't know, I'm guessing. But anyway, we had a man come into the man called the fair office. He said, told us his name. He said, my wife and I just moved into a condo here on Brandel Road right across from the fairgrounds. And he said, I've got a collection of old bottles. And he said, my wife said when we moved here, if I don't get rid of those damn bottles, she's going to get rid of me. He said, do you think the fair would be interested in the bottles? And so we said, well, you know, we'd like to look at them. If they're Albany County, Schenectady County, so on, yeah, we'd be interested in looking at the bottles. So the next Monday morning, we had our meeting, and in comes this guy. What do you have, about 6, 8 big cardboard boxes full of bottles. Filthy dirty. They were black, some of them. And we started looking them over, and we found several of very local interest. A lot of milk bottles, but some other bottles, you know, related to the Altamont, Albany County area. We try to limit any acquisitions to things from Albany, Schenectady, or Greene County. Otherwise, we'd run out of room. So this is our bottle collection. I brought a few tonight to show you. I probably have to put my glasses on again. I guess I should get one of those straps to put around my neck so I don't have to reach for them all the time. This bottle is from Humans Farms Dairy in New Scotland. And this is an earlier milk bottle, before probably 1945, because it has the raised or embossed lettering on the outside. And if you have any bottles at home like this, you can turn them over and look at the bottom. Not all of them, but a lot of the ones that are embossed letters have 2 numbers on the bottom. And that signifies the year they were made. So if you've got an embossed milk bottle at home and you turn it over and there's 2 numbers there, like 25, that bottle was made in 1925. So that's from Humans Dairy in New Scotland. I brought another one that was local here. E.S. Crounce, Ellesmere, New York. Again, embossed letters. This one has 2 numbers on it. '23, I think it says. I can't tell for sure. So into the mid-40s, they stopped making embossed bottles so much and using them, and they went to the painted-on bottles. So everybody's familiar with Indian Ladder Farms in Altamont.
Oh, yeah.
You go there for our apples and our cider, all that good stuff. And believe it or not, until donuts, yes. You said donuts? You want to come to the fair this year? Let me get you a ticket. I never thought of donuts. My God, I love those.
Delicious.
There's your ticket. You're my guest at the fair. So, Indian Ladder Farms, up until 1949, had a dairy barn there with a barn full of Guernsey, registered Guernsey cattle, and they bottled milk there, and they had a milk route, I suppose through this area, because you're pretty close to Indian Ladder Farms. And we have several of their bottles. They're quite scarce. They weren't a big dairy like Borden's or Seal Test or something. They were local. But I think bottles like this now, you tell me they're selling for $40 or more on the eBay. Yeah.
I paid $30 for a small one.
Half pint. Yeah. Mike said he just paid $30 for a half pint. But we have several of these that have been donated to us. And so anyway, in 1949, the barn with the cows in at Indian Ladder Farms burnt to the ground. And they never rebuilt, and they had no desire to go back in the dairy business or the milk business. So that was the end of milk production at Indian Ladder Farms. 1949 that happened. So, seems though I've skipped over some stuff. I might have to back up here. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention that I didn't mention is very important that our committee did. We got the Past Perfect program. We got the archival boxes. We also developed something that the fair did not have, I guess never did. We developed an accession form, a deaccession form, and a loan form, because we have people bring in stuff quite often and want to give it to the fair, and we ask them to sign a deaccession form and or an accession form for us, and we have them all on file. So now if somebody gives something to the fair, we know who gave it, we know the date they gave it, I guess there's a place on there why they gave it, and so on. And we also have a loan form on there. We do loan things. We'll get to something important here pretty soon that I'll show you that we loaned. We have a complete contents of a barber shop in our 1890s building, and we just loaned that as a whole unit to the Rhinebeck Fair, the Dutchess County Fair in Rhinebeck, and they've had it on display for 5 years, and that's due back to Altamont this year. It's just on loan. So we have a loan form.
I don't see a picture of it in here.
The barber shop? No. Okay. What you got next, Mike?
That was the next one.
Military Museum. This is our military superintendent, Kathy Gage. Not much more I can say about that. She needs more room for her exhibits. She gets a lot of support. People bring in things. I loan her things of mine to put on display and so on. So, what you got next, Mike? This is from our Circus Museum. In 1980, the Danbury, Connecticut Fair, which was the State Fair of Connecticut, went out of business. It was a huge fair. It was there for years and years. I don't know all the particulars, but management wasn't doing a great job, I can assume that. And they had a chance to sell the property in Danbury, where the fair had been held for years, for $24 million to the Pyramid Corporation to build a mall there. So that was the end of the Danbury Fair. And they had an auction there that lasted 5-6 days, and they sold all the contents of all of their buildings and their mowing equipment, their trams that brought people from the parking lots in. Anyway, that was in 1980. And fortunately, at the time, the Altamont Fair had some money. So our manager, Reed Northrop, at the time went to the auction over there, and he bought several things. And we now have a circus museum with a lot of things from the the Danbury Fair. We also bought trams there that we pull with tractors, so people that are parked in the further parking lots can get to the gates. You know, they don't have to walk through the mud or whatever and stuff. And that's one thing that I skipped over before now that comes to mind, that I talked to you in the very beginning about the fair buying the 24 acres of land for the fair. We now own 138 acres. So it's large parking lots, and it's gone from 24 to 138. We made some land acquisitions through the years. One acquisition, I think back in the 60s maybe, was for 55 acres, but then we made some smaller acquisitions too. So we now have 138 acres. I skipped that. So Mike, we had a little display in our museum a couple, 3 years ago. We called it Then and Now. So we put a 1925 Singer sewing machine next to a brand new one, and we put what they cost. This Singer cost $77 back in 25, and this fancy machine here cost $2,800. It used to buy, you bought a bag of peanuts in a can like that, and now you buy them in a bag like that at Hannaford. So we did a comparison on a lot of different things. One thing that we did a comparison on, and I brought it to show you because I'm always amused by it. Anybody have an idea what this is? Vacuum cleaner. You're coming to the fair with me. Okay. You're my guest. You gals can come together maybe.
Thank you, dear. Thank you.
You're welcome. This is a vacuum cleaner, and
I thought there were pictures of you with it. I guess not. Okay, just continue.
I was just going to find the date on it. Maybe I can read it. Anyway, this is how it worked. And the reason I'm so amused by this, we have this on display every year at the fair, and I have a sign on it that says vacuum cleaner. And I have people coming up to me, and they said, "Sir, do you work here?" And I said, "Yeah." They said, "How can that be a vacuum cleaner? We don't see a cord." Well, there wasn't one. So what you do is you put this, and you pull the handle up, and that suction brings the dirt up. And it's a slow process, and probably not too thorough. And then there's a tank here on the back where the dirt gathers. And instead of a bag, like your cleaners today, all the dirt is right in there. So this particular vacuum was made in Springfield, Massachusetts. There we are, right there. It's called the Saxonia vacuum cleaner, and it was made in Springfield, Mass. So I always have a lot of fun with that at the fair. So I brought that to show you along with the milk bottles. Here I am demonstrating it. Can you just go back? Yeah, here it is. So, yeah, I don't look too happy there, do I? Yeah. Okay. We go to the next picture, Mike. Okay, I want to show you some other stuff here. This is also in that Then and Now. This is a very early tea tin that tea came in loose, and these are newer tea tins where the bag tea was. This 1 pound canister cost $1.30 from the Great American Tea Company, and this is what these cost today. So that's part of that Then and Now. We may have it again sometime. This is a hand food grinder. Cost 69 cents in the old Montgomery Ward catalog. And this is a modern Cuisinart food processor that does the same thing much easier. Costs $40 though. So, but that's electric. It's got a cord. So I told you we had some really nice carriages besides the one that was kind of a wreck there in our storage building. This is one of our nicer carriages. This is called a Landau. The driver would set up here, and the cab holds 4 people inside. The doors open, and we talked about loaning things, and this particular carriage was loaned to the movie company in 1984 that was in Albany and filmed the movie Ironweed. And actually, Jack Nicholson and Meryl Streep, both nominated for Academy Awards, rode in this carriage in that movie. So it was made by the Cunningham Carriage Company in Rochester, New York. Made many fancy horse-drawn hearses and carriages, and actually I've researched a little bit. The brick buildings there in Rochester still stand where that Cunningham Carriage Company was for years and years. The father ran it, and then the son took it over, and it's since been converted all into condominiums. But it's still there in the city of Rochester. Here's a front-end picture where you can see these are the original candle lamps. Don't go out on a real dark or foggy night because they didn't give off much light. So you better go know where you know the road. These are just fiberglass horses that we use for display. This is the inside of our 1890s building, which is a large building. It was built in 1969. It houses several different displays from the 1890s, a barber shop, a print shop, a bar, and then we have a large collection of carriages and sleighs in there. Most of the carriages and sleighs that we have were made in a mass purchase in 1968. There was a fair in Stafford Springs, Connecticut, and it went out of business, and a man had a large collection, personal man owned these carriages, and he had them on display there at this fair in Stafford Springs, Connecticut for a number of years. His name was Clarence Benton, and he wanted to sell this collection of carriages all as a group, because there was no more Stafford Springs, Connecticut fair, and he had no place to display them or store them or anything. So Stu Rombo was the manager of the Altamont Fair at the time, 1968. He went to Stafford Springs, Connecticut, and made a deal with Mr. Benton to buy the carriage collection, and they were moved here. I have in the paper stuff that I've been going through, I have some of the receipts where they bought these carriages. I found a receipt where somebody from, I think maybe it was Delmar or Clarksville, that went all the way to Stafford Springs, Connecticut with a tractor trailer to bring back a load of carriages to Altamont, and I think he charged at the time $90. Yeah, you couldn't get him to drive to Voorheesville today for 90 bucks. But anyway, that's where the carriages, and also some other antique stuff that we have also came from Clarence Benton's collection. Several cars came from there. We have a car collection, and we have an auto museum that I don't have a picture of, but several of the cars that are in our auto museum came from Clarence Benton's collection too. So this is a better picture of that Albany cutter. This was when we had it on display in our museum. Has the original ingrained carpet around the back of the seat, and unfortunately you can't see the stenciling on it, but it really has some great stenciling on it. The leather is all the original, and if you notice up here on the dashboard, the top of the dashboard, there are 2 little carved eagle heads there that are still intact, and they really add to the, I talked about before how they wanted to dress these sleighs up from what they used to be, make them more desirable, prettier. So this is the McDonald sleigh, made in Albany, New York. What you got next, Mike? One thing I want to mention too, and I thought about it a couple days ago, and I didn't write it in my notes, but I assume several of you live here in this area. And we have a Heath Dairy milk bottle. And a man came through the fair last year and he said, I remember that Heath Dairy. And I said, really, what do you remember about it? And he said, well, my father worked there for years. And I said, where was it? And he said, well, where they bottled and pasteurized the milk was in downtown Albany. But the actual farm where the cows were and where they cut the hay to feed the cows and the corn and everything else was where the Walmart is right here in Glenmont. That's where he was going way back. This was an elderly man, and this was his father that worked there. But I thought that was quite interesting.
That was Norman's son.
Norman Skill was there?
Dairy, yes.
He told me Heath.
Skill number 1 or 2.
Where the Glenmont Walmart is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dairy is the intersection of Wemble Road and 9W.
That was Heath?
That's Heath.
Okay. Okay.
They're all part of,
So maybe I've got that mixed up, because we have Norman Skill bottles too.
yeah.
But I wanted to throw that local interest in there. Mike, what do you have next? This is a very unique item that was given to the fair a few years ago. Probably most of you don't know what a fanning mill is, but a fanning mill, every farm used to have one. And a fanning mill, we used it on the farm. It was used to separate the chaff from the oats and the wheat and the grain so you could have clean seed to plant the next year. And you ran it through a fanning mill. And it was operated with a hand crank, and it had different screens that went in it here. And depending on how much chaff was in your grain would determine what screen you put in. A fanning mill would have probably been 6 foot long and this high. That's how I remember it. This is a salesman's sample of a fanning mill. And it's probably this long and this high. So what I'm piecing together in my mind, that a lot of fanning mills and other agricultural things were made in Cobleskill and in Central Bridge. There was a Harder company in Cobleskill that made dog powers, they made fanning mills, they made a lot of agriculture things. There was also the Westinghouse company in Central Bridge, George Westinghouse. So what I'm picturing is a salesman at one of those places would carry this, it's easy to carry, on the train, leave Cobleskill or Central Bridge, head towards Plattsburgh, stop along the way to all the feed stores, the farm stores, and try to sell fanning mills based on this salesman sample that he could carry with him on the train. And then at the end of the week, arrive back in Central Bridge or Cobleskill. So this is very unique. There's not many of them in the whole world, trust me. A salesman sample of a fanning mill. And we have that in our farm machinery museum, along with a lot of the old gasoline engines and old tractors and threshing machines and a hop press and all kinds of unique stuff. And we've been able to get signage on most of it in recent years, so people walking through have an idea of what it was used for. Corn planters and all kinds of different stuff. So what else you got, Mike? Well, this is the man that gave us the milk bottles. There he is presenting them to Bev. I got them all cleaned up. We went on Amazon, and you can buy this white material to put in them. So we bought some bags of it. Unfortunately, in the embossed bottles, it doesn't show up very good. You can't read the letters. But on the painted on bottles, you can see that it brings out the lettering in the picture. We have some bottles from The Meadowbrook Dairy in Clarksville, still in business. I guess they still peddle milk door to door. We have several bottles from that company, some with black letters on, some with the orange letters on. I can remember when my wife and I first got married, we lived in Schoharie. We had 2 little kids, and we had a milkman there from Mountain Dairy in Cobleskill. We had a milk box outside the door, insulated, put the milk in there every day, and I guess he came every other day and stuff, but you talk to young people about this stuff, they just don't have a clue, you know. They never saw anything but a Stewart's and a cardboard milk bottle or a milk container. So, what else you got, Mike? I'm doing okay on time. Yeah, I'm going to leave plenty of time for questions. This is a map that we did. We still are very interested in how much fewer farms there are in Albany County than they were 25 years ago, 50 years ago. Of course, it's mass. But we did this map, and it pinpoints how many actually active farms there were producing milk. Went in cans back then, and from our farm in Bern, a man came through with a truck every day and picked up our cans of milk, and they went to Central Bridge right along the railroad tracks there. There was a seal test processing for milk. They took the cans there and brought our empty cans back every day. Borden's, a lot of people up on the Bern area, a lot of their milk went to Borden's and Manans. Same type of thing there. Went in cans, dumped, pasteurized, homogenized, empty cans came back to the farm. So that's the way the system worked back then. This is an interesting item that we have. It's called a McCaskey Store Safe. And we have it in our little hardware store in the 1890s building on display. It has a cash drawer here, and it is made of metal, the framework. The cash drawer is wooden. These are from the early 1900s. And what's really unique about the one that we have, it still has a paper receipt under one of these clips. So that's what they did. If you came into the store and you bought a pound of nails and a new hammer, I wrote out a paper slip. And you paid me, I put paid on the slip. And then I would file it here by the initial of your last name. So at the end of the day, I had all my receipts for the day by name, and the money in the cash drawer. So this is a little bit later than some of the McCaskey store files, because I read where the very first ones that were made, the whole cabinet was oak. And there was a danger of your store or business burning, and that would have been the end of your store file. So they started to make them out of metal. Our store file, McCaskey store file, has a paper receipt in there from the mill right there in Altamont along the tracks. Some of you may remember it as the Ackerman Mill next to the railroad tracks. Before Ackerman, it was the Hayes Mill. And it was a mill for farmers to go and buy supplies and feed for cattle and horses and so on. And I brought a picture here of what the Ackerman Mill looked like. It burned back in the 80s. And but before it was the Ackerman Mill, and it was a big building. I remember going there with my father and buying cow and horse feed. But anyway, before it was the Ackerman Mill, it was the Hayes Company. And If you remember several years ago that the Altamont Fair had a Victorian house adjacent to the fairgrounds that was open as a museum. It was called the Hayes House. And that's where Mr. Hayes lived. So this is a receipt from 1918 where somebody went into Hayes and Company, flour, feed, and grain constantly on hand. And this is the person's last name. They bought oats for $6.38. And we have this receipt under one of the clips in our McCaskey store file. Mr. Hayes was an interesting man. He had that beautiful Victorian house, Victorian style house, built there in Altamont in 1910. And it was right directly next to the mill. And he was getting older at the time and kind of frail, not doing much work in the store anymore, the mill. So when he had the house built next door, he had a glass enclosed porch built on the whole side of the house towards the mill. And stories tell me that Mr. Hayes used to sit in that enclosed porch to look out at his mill and see what his workers were doing. So Mr. Hayes, he died in 1925. So that's interesting that we still have a receipt from that Hayes family when he owned that mill up until he died in 1925. So, Mike, what you got next? This is just an overshot of the early fairgrounds, horse barn, and the grandstand, the judges' stand. This original grandstand, I didn't go into too much depth about it because I didn't know how much time I'd have, but that original grandstand that was built in 1892 is still standing, and it's still intact, but not as a grandstand. Many years ago, it was converted into a cattle barn, and has since been developed into the building where we have the chickens. All the cages for the chickens during the fair. That grandstand was built in the summer or the fall of 1892 and in preparation for that first fair opening in 1893. But we built a new grandstand in 1925 that burned to the ground in 1995. It was an electrical fire. It devastated, to me, the fair has never been the same.
You had a boat in it.
Yeah. And it was terrible loss. It could not be rebuilt for several reasons. One is it was a complete wood structure, and in 1995 the fire people would not allow that. It had to be metal framed and so on for safety's sake. And the cost was just, we didn't have it. So instead they had to settle for aluminum bleachers that we have now with no cover over them, unfortunately. But that's the history of the grandstands at the fair.
You don't have a picture of the old one?
I do. I don't know if do we have a picture of the old one with us? I thought we did.
I don't see.
Oh, here's a picture I want you to keep for a minute too.
Which one?
This one right here. This one, or either one. Yeah, this one's better. I want to tell you a little story about this building. This building still stands. This is what it looks like today. This building goes back to the very beginning of the fair. One of the four guys that came together in 1892 to form the fair was the undertaker in Altamont, and his name was Mr. Hallenbeck, and he was one of the four businessmen that formed the first fair. So Mr. Hallenbeck sold furniture as well as being an undertaker in Altamont. He had a furniture showroom, I guess, in the funeral home. I don't know, I was never there. Didn't want to go either. But anyway, he was one of the original four, and he said to the other three guys, he said, I would like to build a building on the fairgrounds. I will pay for it and use it for a showroom during the days that the fair is open. And if I ever go out of the furniture business or die or don't need the building anymore, it will automatically go free and clear to the fair, which it did. He used it for 10 years as a furniture showroom. We've used it through the years for, just so many things. It was a vegetable building. We had a vendor in there selling candy in bulk one year, or more than 1 year, and it has this kind of pagoda roof, and of course we've kept it up with a new roof and paint and so on. But that building dates to, I think, 1899. So not long after the first fair, Mr. Holmbeck made the arrangements. So we call it the Holmbeck Building. What else you got, Mike? Oh my God, I got so much more to say. No, I don't think we have a picture. We have several pictures of the grandstand. Actually, we have a nice picture in our museum. Yeah, this would be the back end of the grandstand facing the track. This is the judge's stand, and this is the stage where performers, opposite, but this is the back end of the... Now,
Through the back, didn't you?
you could walk in either end, or there were a couple of doors here and windows, and all underneath the grandstand were all kinds of vendors. I can picture the Culligan waterman with a fountain of water, and the person selling fudge, and just all kinds of stuff. There would have probably been, 25 or 30 vendors in there. And you walk down through there, and all gone, all history. Now this is the old grandstand on the other side of the track. And this is after it was converted from a grandstand, and you can see the lettering there. It was a cattle barn, and it was a cattle barn for several years. But we built a new cattle barn, 10, 15 years ago, a big pole barn. And so Mike says that's all the pictures we have. But there's a lot more I want to talk to you about, and I'll stretch it till 8:30, then we'll have time for questions. Think of some good questions. Through the years and even today, the fairgrounds is used for a multitude of things besides the fair. And for years, we've had the Scottish Games there on Labor Day weekend. We have a wedding venue where you can rent a building and have weddings there. Of course, you have to have it catered. We don't have any kitchens or anything, but it's very nice. And just this past weekend, the grounds was full of campers. We had the Old Songs Festival. People come from all over for that. We have a lot going on. We always did. And what I've done a lot of research on is we had auto races there on the track. And most of them were not during the fair. But this group of auto racers from all over the Northeast would go on a circuit all summer. Like one week they might be at the Greene County Fairgrounds in Carroll, and next week in Massachusetts, and the next week in Vermont, but they went all over. And we had, in our archives I brought to show you, this is a 1947 poster of the auto races being held. This was on Memorial Day weekend. But through the years, we would get anywhere, or the group would get, they rented the fairgrounds from us, but they would get anywheres, and I have found a record of all the attendances. And it was not unusual for them to get 4,000 or 5,000 people on a holiday weekend. And the last races were in 1953. There was a very famous person that raced there, ended up becoming very famous. There was a fellow born in Gilliland, and his name was Lee Wallard. And Lee Wallard was born in 1910, and Lee Wallard raced at Altamont for several years. He tinkered with cars. He was a great mechanic. He raced there in the 30s. He would have been in his 20s, but I'm talking about the 1930s. He went into the military in the 1940s. He actually operated a bulldozer in Alaska where they were building airstrips during World War II. But anyway, Lee Wallard bettered himself all the time. His family actually owned a restaurant and a bar on Route 20, almost across from the Gilderland Police Station and the Gilderland Town Hall there. There's a bar there, a restaurant, whatever. That was where the Wallard family had a business, and Lee Wallard actually lived between Altamont and Gilderland Center. He was married, had a couple little girls. So he got out of the military in the early 40s, came back to Altamont, tinkering with cars and stuff, and he had the opportunity to go to Indianapolis and drive a car in the Indianapolis 500. And in 1951, Lee Wallard from Altamont, New York, actually won the Indianapolis 500. And Altamont's most famous son. I don't know if you're familiar with auto racing, but it's like the World Series in baseball and the Super Bowl in football and Wimbledon and tennis. It's the biggest thing in the country. It's a 500-mile race. Lee Wallard, he won it in 1951. He led, it's a 2.5-mile track. He led that race 159 laps out of the 200 raced. And he set a record as the first time the race was ever completed in less than 4 hours. He did that 500-mile race in like 3 hours and 50-some minutes, 56 something, but under 4 hours, first time ever. And of course, those records mean nothing today, the way the cars are and stuff. But anyway, so poor Lee Wallard, happy. Oh my God, I've got articles from the Albany Times-Union. He got the nickname Cinderella Man, and he was the greatest thing ever in Albany County. He was famous, let's face it. And he had made arrangements, actually, before he went to Indianapolis to drive that car in 1951, he'd made arrangements with a friend of his. His name was Joey Chitwood, Sr. And Joey Chitwood, Jr., you might remember at the Altamont Fair, they had an auto thrill show every year. But his father was a resident and a race car driver in Reading, Pennsylvania. And Joey Chitwood Sr. was a friend of Lee Wallard's. And he'd been up here to race at Altamont. And he asked Lee Wallard a week after the Memorial Day races at the Indianapolis if he would come to Reading, Pennsylvania and help promote his races there at a track in Reading, Pennsylvania. And he had agreed before he ever won the race in Indianapolis. Anyway, he went to Reading and he raced, and the last lap of the race, his car caught on fire and he was burned so badly that he ended up having 27 surgeries, and he was airlifted from the hospital in Reading. About a week after the accident, he was airlifted back here to Albany. A doctor and nurses came with him on the flight, and he was not allowed to speak to any news people here in Albany. He was taken right to Albany Medical Center, and he was in there for months. And about 3 years later, I think it was 3 years later, so it had been 1954, he actually went back to Indianapolis and thought he would try to race again, but he couldn't. And so he retired then, and actually they sold their property in Gilderland Center, and he ended up moving to Florida. and he died there in 1963. And he had two daughters that were, I think maybe 4 and 7 years old in 1951 when he raced. And I just found out recently through somebody that was a distant cousin of the family that the one daughter just died in Florida. She was in her 80s, and the other daughter is still living in Florida. So they moved down there in 1963. But Lee Wallard, Cinderella Man, this cousin that I talked to, and this is kind of a gory story, but it's important, I'm going to tell it. She said that she could, this was an older lady that I talked to, I would say maybe late 80s. But anyway, she said, I remember after that accident, and we would have like a family reunion in the summer, and she and her parents would go, and a lot of people from Lee Wallard's close family would be there, like brothers-in-laws, and so on. And he said, this lady told me that I wondered why, when they had their shirts off and we'd go swimming in the lake or whatever, that they all had scars on their stomachs. And the story that she told me is that all those relatives came forward and donated skin grafts for him at Albany Med, and I believe he had 26, 27 surgeries there, and he was there for months. But the relatives, the men came forward and gave skin to do skin grafts, and she could remember that. I thought that was very interesting. So that was car racing. So the other thing that we had starting in 1893 was horse racing. We had a track, we had a grandstand, we had people around Altamont that owned horses, they wanted to race them. So they came to the fair. So for several years, we had harness races. And my real interest in that is, well, I have a couple, but my family lived in Altamont. My grandfather's name was Lester Crounce. His wife's name was Ella Crounce. Excuse me. They were both very involved in the fair. And my grandfather was the official starter at the Altamont Fair for the horse races. There's his business card. He went around to a lot of fairs. He went to the Chatham Fair. I can remember my mother telling me the story that she went with Dad to the Rhinebeck Fair because he was the official starter for the harness races. So, and my grandmother was involved in the fair too. She was the superintendent of the ladies' goods department where they had all their quilts and doilies and stuff. So, and that was all during the 1930s. I never knew my grandfather, actually. He died in 1944, and I wasn't born until 46. But I know a lot about his history. I read an article that I stumbled on in one of the old Altamont Enterprises that some famous racer from, I don't remember the name, a car racer, driver, came to Altamont for one of these holiday race weekends. And it said in the Altamont paper that this driver and another one stayed with Lester and Ella Crounce on Helderberg Avenue in their house. There were no motels in Altamont. These guys didn't want to sleep in the fairgrounds in their car. So apparently a lot of people in the village of Altamont took these drivers in and got their meals, and they had a place to stay while they were in Altamont. So I thought that was pretty neat. So anyway, back to the harness racing. The last time we had harness races at the fair was in 1986. But a lot happened before that. And probably the most memorable thing that happened was that a man in Albany whose name was Frank Wiswall, and he was a very prominent attorney in the city of Albany. And Frank Wiswall was a horse enthusiast, harness horses. He owned harness horses, he drove harness horses, he took care of them, in addition to being a very prominent lawyer. And he was very involved in the races because of their close proximity to Albany at the Altamont Fairgrounds. And Frank Wiswall made arrangements there was a horse that was not racing in this area. It was owned by people in Watertown, but it was mostly racing out in Ohio where there was bigger races, or in New Jersey. The horse's name was Billy Direct. And Billy Direct had the world's record for the fastest harness horse in the country. And so Frank Wiswall wanted to give the interest in harness racing to the people of Altamont a burst. They needed a pick-me-up. So he made arrangements to have Billy Direct shipped here to Altamont, and in October of 1939 that he would put on an exhibition on the track there in Altamont. And about 1,500 people turned out to see him that day, and they were hoping he would break the world's record. And actually, he did. But unfortunately, a week later, he went to Delaware, Ohio, and broke his own record that he made here in Altamont. So Frank Wiswall was, of course, kind of disappointed, because I'm sure he'd put out money to pay for this. So Billy Direct came back to Altamont, and they had another horse in the Fleming stable named the Widower. And they hooked the two horses together as a team, and they tried to set a record on the half-mile track of a team racing a half-mile. There were no other teams to race against him, because there were other teams, but nowhere near as fast. And they were looking for a prompter to go alongside the horses to encourage them to go faster. So Frank Wiswall brought out his 1938 LaSalle car, and he went around the outside of those two horses on the Altamont track, and they did set a world's record for a team of harness horses on a half-mile track, and believe it or not, that record still stands today. 1939. Yep. So I brought a picture here of, you can pass this around if you like. This is my grandfather standing behind the sulky, and that's Billy Direct in front of the grandstand there on the Altamont track. Unfortunately, Billy Direct was a stallion and a world's record holder, and they decided he wasn't going to race anymore. So these owners up in Watertown said, we want to sell Billy Direct. And this is right after the Depression, the late 1930s. Harness racing wasn't all that popular.
So this is a harness.
Right, that's a harness horse, pulling a sulky, right. Yeah, as opposed to the thoroughbreds at Saratoga where they ride them, yeah. So anyway, they ended up trying to market Billy Direct all over the country, and finally, after a couple years of trying to sell him, they ended up selling him to a breeding farm in Pennsylvania, the Hanover Farms, and they only got $10,000 for this world record holder horse. And the article I read, it's not really comical, but it's real. It's what happened. Is somebody wrote in this article, whoever authored this particular article, said that unfortunately the world's record that Billy Direct set was in a small hick town of Altamont in upstate New York, and the horse would have been much more marketable and valuable if this had happened at Goshen or a big track in New Jersey, for instance. But the article said that, you know, like Altamont was just a place out in the middle of nowhere, and there was a handful of people watching it, and so, well, it was a world's record. It wasn't a big event. So that was kind of interesting about Billy Direct. A little bit more to that story. Frank Wiswall, a very prominent attorney, very wealthy, he proposed to the village fathers of Altamont and the people involved with the fair at the time. This would have been 42, 43, something like that, that he wanted to build a harness track in Altamont, a pari-mutuel harness track like there is in Saratoga. and the village fathers wanted nothing to do with it. We don't want that here. This is a small community, rural town. We don't want a parimutuel harness track here. So that's when the Wiswall family went to Saratoga and built Saratoga Harness Track, and that opened in 1948. So he was turned away from Altamont, and he ended up going to Saratoga. That land was available across the street on Nelson Avenue from the thoroughbred track. He bought it and built it. Of course, it's a beautiful place if you've ever been there. And it's been in business since 1948. So that's a little bit about the harness racing. Is there anybody here that's never been to the Altamont Fair? Well, you're going this year. You never been? Let me get you a ticket. Yeah. You could be my guest this year if you'd like to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I made it to the Scottish Games last year.
Okay. Well, this will get you into the fair any day for free. So, a couple things I left out earlier, because again, I was afraid of time, but the Albany County Fair, what'd you say?
I said you have to do questions yet, too.
Do you have a question? Well, then, please maintain your seat. We do this all the time. Yeah. I told her the other day at the meeting, this past Monday, that I felt a little quirky, and she said, "My God, you've been quirky as long as I know you." This is my grandfather, Lester Crounce. This is Mr. Fleming driving Billy Direct the horse. Yep. Like me. Yeah. Yeah. If you didn't hear, she said Lester Crounce was handsome, and I said, like me. I left out a couple of things earlier. One thing I wanted to mention to you was that the Altamont Fair ran single as the Albany County Fair. But then in 1924 or 1922, Schenectady County was looking to get involved in a fair. So they came on with us in 1922. And in 1945, for several years, many years, there had been a track and a grandstand and a fair in Carroll, New York for the Greene County. And they went out of business. Declining membership, declining attendance. So in 1945, Greene County joined with Albany, Schenectady for the Altamont Fair, and we are the only tri-county fair in the state, compromising the three counties of Albany, Schenectady, and Troy.
It's still true.
That's still true to this day, yes. Yeah. Seems like there was something else I thought of while I was rambling. You think of anything I forgot, Mike?
No, not really.
A couple of things I would like to mention is, if anybody might be interested, we're always looking for volunteers to sit in the museums during the fair. You can work different shifts, day, night, evening, whatever. For a 3-hour shift, there's a free ticket with it.
It would be 11 to 2.
That's 3 hours.
Yeah, 3-hour shift.
3-hour shifts. So if you know anybody that's retired or whatever would be interested in something like that, what we do is, if you're willing to just sit in one of the museums and greet people, and do that for a 3-hour shift, then you have a free ticket for all day at the fair. So if you know of anybody's interested, we are looking for volunteers. We're also always looking for material for in the museums, as long as it pertains to the historical things in Albany, Schenectady, or Greene County. We don't want to just go take any old thing, because what happens is it ends up in storage containers there at the fair and is never seen again. And that's no good. That's no good. So that's a couple things that I wanted to mention. Okay, questions? Ma'am?
I thought you might want to mention the historical signs we did last year on the buildings.
Yes, on all of, thank you. We sent away to a company, we bought beautiful metal signs that we've attached to all of those older buildings that date either before 1900 or just after. And we've affixed those signs to the outside of those buildings in a place that when the fair is going on, when somebody walks into a building, they can see that that building was built 1896 or whatever. And they're beautiful metal signs, and they're colorful. They're a real dark green color with yellow letters. And what did we buy? About 10 of those for the older buildings. And we've got them all in place. And they really add a lot to the history of the fairgrounds.
Paid for by a grant.
Paid for by a grant.
Altamont.
Altamont Community Traditions, yeah. Yes.
When is the fair this year?
The fair is August 12th, Tuesday, to August 17th, Sunday. Wednesday is Senior Citizens Day and Veterans Day. So all senior citizens and veterans are admitted free till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. All day Wednesday. So if you know of anybody who would like to come, yes, ma'am.
I didn't mean to break in before you finish your...
Oh, no, I could pick it up later.
I want to ask a question. Why is it you're not talking about the history of programs they have there? Like, for example, I came tonight because I was the secretary of the English Horse Show for 2 years around the 1980s. And apparently that's not part of the history. That to talk about the history is more of the buildings and the...
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, but I mean, there are loads and loads of programs every year at the fair. I mean, there's English horse shows, there's pony shows.
Maybe people that have never gone to the fair don't know that there's...
Go online if you're interested in...
Like the pig races.
Pig races. If you're interested in seeing what's available what day at the fair, we have a beautiful website. You can go on there and see the program for every day, what days the pig races are, what time they are, what time the Western Horse Show is, what time the English Horse Show is, which day it is, the cattle shows, the different breeds of cattle and the beef cattle and the sheep and all that. It's all on the website. And also every day we have musical entertainment. That's all listed on there too. We have a beautiful amphitheater on the fairgrounds with a nice stage, and we have a veterans program on Wednesday for veterans, but we have almost every evening we have different bands there and entertainment and music. And the days of dreading coming to the fair because you're badgered by Midway people and games and stuff, that's not true anymore.
Don't have those?
They have them, but they're all segregated on the fairgrounds. You can enjoy all the museums and see the Ferris wheel from a distance and all these exhibits and stuff, and you can pick your own route. Yes?
You want to tell them about the different food that's there too.
Well, there's a lot of good food there. I particularly like the sausage sandwiches with all the peppers and onions loaded on top. Yeah. Oh yeah, waffles, yeah. You go home and have heartburn for a week. But it's fun. It's once a year.
Are the museums only open during the fair?
Only during the fair, yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yes.
I moved from Springfield, Massachusetts 3 years ago, and last summer was actually the first time I went out to Altamont. I was bringing my grandson to the Helderberg workshop, and as I'm not sure, is it 85? Did I come out 85? through Slingerland's and is that Scotia, New Scotland?
We went through Voorheesville.
Still not real familiar.
Yeah.
But as I came to make the turn onto, I don't remember what the name of the street was, New Salem? Is that New Salem, the street where there's a sign that talks about Altamont Fair? And then on the right-hand side, there's like an ice cream shop or something. And I thought the fair was just this little tiny area. So I'm amazed to hear this. Where is it? Is it located like way in the back or something?
I think from your description, you're at the Punkintown Fireman's Fair in New Salem.
Oh, that's Pumpkin?
Yeah, that's every year in July. They've had it for years. Yeah, the Altamont Fair, you're in New Salem for that. It's put on by the firemen there. It's been for years and years. It's a moneymaker for the firemen. It's quite a big thing, but it's got nothing to do with the Altamont Fair. Our fair is right in the village limits of Altamont, and there's all kinds of signs there. There's a sign there almost as big as this room. Altamont Fair, turn here.
I'm mistaken.
Yeah.
Thank you for the area.
Yeah, yeah. Just go on our website. It'll give you directions.
Okay.
Give you good directions. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about it.
Any other questions?
What was your name again, Doug?
Doug Cornwell.
Cornwell?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, where can you watch this on YouTube? Our son-in-law used to go to the fair with his animals when he was young, but he's out of town, he couldn't come.
Okay. Bob, when will this be on YouTube for viewing?
You're gonna have to edit it first, so I don't know the exact date yet.
Okay.
Could it be through the library?
It goes in the library.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But he said it had to be edited some, so it'd be a few days, but not too long. Yeah, yeah. Anybody else? Please.
Good job.
I got you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that very much.
We had a sailboat stored in the old grandstands.
Yeah.
And we went to bed one night watching the news and saw the big flames in the thing. And said, oops, there it goes.
I talked quite at length to one of the firemen that came that night from Gilliland Center Fire Department. And he said the rain was just torrential. And actually, that's what caused the fire. The rain coming in and got into an electrical box and started the fire. But anyway, he told me that that night it was just treacherous. And when they pulled in with the fire trucks from Gilliland Center, the whole thing was in flames. And he said there was just no putting it out. They just had to watch it burn. And he said the wind was blowing the rain in sheets right across there. And he said it was just brutal. But there was no saving it. Of course, by the time they got fire trucks out of a garage in Gilliland Center, got up there, it was, you know, and it was an all wooden frame building, all the benches and the seating and the frameworks, all wood, no metal, so it went pretty quick.
No, it's all the vehicles were stored in it.
There were vehicles stored in it, yeah. One of our biggest money makers of the year, believe it or not, is not the fair. The fair is very dependent on the weather. And if we get a couple bad days, attendance is down. That's one thing that I wanted to mention, and I skipped over it. But I think last year we had 66,000 paid admissions during Tuesday through Sunday, which seems pretty good. But looking back in history, I found that in 1985, we had 130,000 there. And then in 1986, I think it was very close. We had the Budweiser Clydesdale horses there, and we had like 129,000. They were the two biggest years ever by far. A couple years ago, 66,000 last year was pretty good because we had good weather. But the year before we had 2 or 3 rainy days. I think the paid attendance was down around 40,000. So, but anyway, what I started to say was the biggest money maker not dependent on the weather, is winter storage. Because in all of our buildings, we move all the carriages to one side and exhibits to one side, and we fill all those big buildings there with all kinds of motor homes and campers and boats and classic cars and motorcycles, and people pay by the foot. I don't even know what they charge, but I know overall the whole thing is very profitable because there's no labor involved. You bring your boat, you back it in and unhook it. And it's not dependent on the weather. So it's kind of a guaranteed thing, and it works well. And we sell out. I know we were sold out last year, every inch of space. And I'm telling you, when they put the cars in there, they put them about that far apart.
Just from those 3 counties, the people that stored their things there from
I would say most from the Albany, Altamont, Duanesburg, pretty close area. I don't think anybody would come from like Catskill or anything. Maybe they do. Yeah. But we do advertise that on the website about having the winter storage and what they charge for it. And it's good storage. I mean, they're good roofs and they're good concrete floors, and it's good dry storage. Safe. That's one thing too about the fair and stuff that, not that I'm any part of it, but I observe it every year. The Altamont Fair, I think, does an especially good job of, when you walk around the fairgrounds, we have all kinds of security. We have Albany County Sheriffs, we have Altamont Village Police, we have state police on bicycles, we have state police undercover, we have EMTs with golf carts and radios that can assist somebody that's fallen or has a medical problem. And we're really on top of those things that you can't move on that fairgrounds without seeing a uniformed security person. And people feel very safe there. We have very little problem. Very little problem. So I'm done. They got to lock up the library soon. I want to thank you all for coming. Have a safe trip home. I really do appreciate having the opportunity to put this information out on behalf of the fair. So thank you again. Yeah.